wanting to do? Basically, we just want to help you have the right foundations so you can help your members. That's essentially what it's all about. All the stuff we talk about later and how we achieve these things is almost immaterial. Your members are the most important things. Now, if you look at this middle thing here, I think it was ASIC or APRA was one of the ones who created that. Blindly stole it, I'll admit it. But what it does do is highlight the supply chain within the super fund, and it's complex. At Iress, we don't even pretend to try and play across that entire supply chain. What we do, though, is we focus on two areas only, namely fund administration and on the advice and member engagement piece. We've spent a lot of time already talking about advice side of things, etc. The only thing I'm going to add to that top one is we also do member portals. So those of you who use AOL or use the APIs that drive AOL, that essentially is where we start to play there. And how do you connect with the members, allow them to do transactions, connect with your systems and things like that. Most of that comes down to operational efficiency and automation. The thing we've got in grey there in terms of calculators, historically we have not played there at all. Why? Because they're very bespoke. Everybody's got a flavour of what these need to look like. Fortunately, the government for once has actually helped us out. RG276 actually gives us a way to now start to create a generic template. So we can basically come up with a tool. There can be configurations, you can dial them up, dial them down. But we've got an opportunity here that we, as product, are going to start to explore of could we make a solution that could be used by more than one customer. And the minute that becomes something which is viable, we'll then start to look at that as being a product that Iress will look to offer. In terms of the fund administration, we pretty much play across the board. We don't do call center operations, we don't do claims administration for insurance, but pretty much everything else we offer is driven around digital engagement and how do we get efficiency into the system. Now, when we start to say we want to make things more efficient, one is you just start to do it faster or more automated. The other is you start to get rid of the areas where you can start to have errors. So this means we need to start to extend out across the value chain, and that's what we've done. So for example, take SuperConnector. It's allowed us to get closer to the employers. So when they start to give us data, we can validate it up front. So when it gets to the funds registry system, it's really clean. The point where you're sending something out, whether it's to ATO or other entities, again, less chance of something going wrong, less risks around that. If you look at rollovers, again, using things like Acurity Online and SuperConnector to either get closer to the fund requesting it or to the member who's wanting to initiate that type of thing. All that connectivity, all that clean data, again, driving efficiency and mitigating risk. So how do we do all of this stuff? We obviously have been doing product management for a while at Iress, but what we've done now is kind of taken a new focus on it. We've now got a dedicated multidisciplinary team that focuses on this. We brought together all the elements we thought were necessary to be able to look at it right through from the time when you're designing product, all through to the place where you've built it, distributed, monitoring it, and that full life cycle. And it is iterative. We've got product managers, we've got product specialists, we've got a legislation squad, Anita's one of them. I nicknamed them my sandmen. They're the ones who let me sleep at night. Let's throw a bit of sand. I know they're looking after all the upcoming things. And all these changes are going to affect our products. They kind of give us the heads up. All those BPIAs they create and share with you guys so we can get your feedback, help shape the product design. And of course, documentation, whether it's in form of release notes or other microlearn videos or things like that we start to push out. For those who have been somewhat familiar with RG274, the product design and distribution obligations, that looks somewhat familiar. It's basically this idea that you need to have this virtual, this circle, this feedback loop around anything that you do in product. So it's great to design a product, push it out there, but if you're not monitoring it, if you're not seeing what people are feeling about it, if you're not looking for complaints and I guess even legislative changes, etc., how do you know you're offering a product that really works? So with you guys obviously offering an AFSL product, we need to make sure the product we're offering to you that allows you to offer that follows the same good governance principles. And that is why, for example, even as a product team, we will do regular governance meetings internally to make sure what we're delivering is actually aligning to what our customers need and what the market needs. Acurity, you all know that, it's our registry system, etc. One of the advantages we've got about Acurity compared to some other players in the market is we use our own product. We offer an admin service using Acurity. So that means we've got people in the office every day using that system and going, oh God, this sucks, or if only this was better. And we take that and feed it back into making the product better. Some people want to call it eating our own dog food. Well, I reckon it's pretty pedigree dog food. So when we start to look at Acurity, the main focus we've got is around automation. Okay? We all know that there's a lot of members, a lot of interactions, etc. Every time there's an exception, every time something goes wrong, it's somebody in front of a keyboard, somebody having to push some paper around. That's wasted effort, that's wasted time, it's wasted money. So everything we do when we make a product design, product decision is around, can this be better than what it is today? Can we get rid of some paper? Can we push something back to a member so they can provide more information up front before an admin person gets it? The last thing we want is somebody comes in the front door, a call center person has to call them up, contact them, get something back, and then something gets initiated. So it's always how do you get it back to the source of truth to give you as much information as cleanly as possible. Next slide, please. Now, the next set of slides that we're going to go through are going to have a lot of content. Okay? We're not going to run through all of that. There's a session next year where we will be walking through product roadmaps in detail, etc. But more importantly, reach out to your relationship managers, if you guys can wave so people can know who you are, and set up a session. Basically what we've been doing with some funds is setting these things up on a quarterly basis. We release our roadmaps on a quarterly basis as well. And what we can do then is have a good discussion with you around where's your fund going, what are the opportunities you're seeing, what are the challenges you're facing, and kind of make sure that feeds back into our product roadmap, as well as sharing where we see the world going. In terms of some of the product releases that we've had recently, some of these have been driven because of demands from funds, basically things like decoupling title and gender. A couple of legislative ones, for example, non-concessional cons, downsizer cons, etc. And of course, we are moving towards the continued rollout of WebUI. So we did skip one slide. We can go back from this one. No, there we go, that one. In terms of our vision for Acurity, the whole concept is, A, get it to the cloud. And that's kind of driven by this cloud strategy, get rid of the thick client. It's a concept of making it easy to integrate with. So any of your third-party systems, whether it's data tools, whether it's CRM, anything like that, make it easy so you can get information in and out and drive processes. And the obvious one, support scalability, resilience. In other words, just making it better than what it is today. Okay, things we're currently working on. Two big things, and again, when I joined Iress a couple of years back, 3 years back, people were talking about archiving being on the roadmap. We finally got it going, guys. I know it took a little while. Archiving is going to basically focus on performance first. Okay? We're looking at the large tables like GL that get really, really big. How do you kind of strip some of that data back so the database keeps on operating efficiently so you can start to do these long batch processes with this fee calculations that efficiently? One of the things which has started to bubble to the surface in the last, let's call it 3-4 months, has been driven around data breaches. Optus springs to mind, for example. And people are now starting to ask the question, well, how much member data should we really have? We all know it's 7 years, blah, 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 last transaction. But what about someone who was with your fund 15 years ago? Should you really still have that member data in there? Now, one of the good and bad things about Acurity is it true GL. Now, you can't just go magically deleting records all over the place and delete a member and all their history because you're not going to balance. It's going to be a mess. So part of phase 2 of our archiving is how do you get rid of certain bits of PIR, whether it's around beneficiaries, members, and things like that, but still keep your GL intact. And so we've got a thought around adding that as part of phase 2 of archiving. The other thing we're doing is doing our architect alternative. So basically we're going to be adding Java as an alternative scripting language to Acurity. Now I did say the word alternative. I'm sure many of your developers, many of your IT areas have spent a lot of time, effort, and money building out scripts that will do validations, will do complex DB calculations and the like. All of that will still work. Okay? The Java thing we're doing here is another complementary language. What it means is you'll be able to hire developers who are skilled in Java instead of needing someone who's skilled in architect, which, let's be honest, is a very, very small pool. So it kind of gives all of that. Something else which is worth mentioning out of this one is this advisor member portal API. At the moment, if you had to go to your web developer and say, I want to add switch capabilities to my portal, let's assume you're not using AOL that we offer, but you're building your own portal. God help them, is all I'm going to say. You need to know a lot about Acurity. You need to know that there's 6 underlying calls you need to make to the database, how to populate those things, etc. What we're doing here is just making it easier to use. We're kind of making it web developer friendly. So whether they're using this for their own mobile apps, whether they're using this for the website, they can call a single thing of do switch, and it hides all that complexity and allows them to focus on getting your business benefits compared to becoming experts in Acurity. Next one, please. Catching up where we are. Okay, so we talked about Acurity in the cloud at the last conference. We kind of said we're doing something in that space, we're getting there. Earlier today, you guys had a bit of a discussion around ESG and what happens in that space. So yes, we are moving towards the cloud. We've got 2 streams of work that have been going for the better part of a year and a half already. And the 2 streams focus, the one on how do you get the existing solution into the cloud. The other one is how do you take advantage of more cloud native capabilities. Those are going on. Next slide, we'll talk a bit more into that detail. On this one, though, we're going to talk about what does this mean from an ESG perspective. Okay, so we use AWS as our cloud provider. And they're saying they're using fully renewable energy sources by 2025. And that's good. The problem is that's not as good as you could be. So things like auto-scaling infrastructure, that's where this really comes to the fore. So most of the time, your databases, your servers, all that compute power is sitting idle and doing sweet nothing. You should be able to turn it off. With auto-scaling infrastructure, you can. So what happens is there'll be a certain base level that'll keep the lights on, and as demand happens, whether it's, for example, a fee run, or members are starting to log in, it'll detect number of worker threads and other things like that, and then fire up additional instances on demand. Get that work done, dial it back down again. So you're only starting to see this spike in energy usage when it's really required because of either fund calculations or because of member-driven requests. How do you make that happen? Well, that's fully automated deployment. The concept of somebody going and putting stuff onto a server, deploying it, making sure it's there, you can't have that happen. It all needs to be infrastructure as code. It needs to be that something can magically detect, I need another 5 compute servers, and they just magically fire up and are able to go in minutes. That's kind of where that fully automated deployment comes into it. So by starting to couple that together across your production environment, but also across your test environment, starts to really come into play. So test environments, you shouldn't need to keep these things around most of the time. But when you do want to create a test environment, you want to be able to have it being super configurable. So there'll be a dashboard concept where you'll say, I need Acurity version, blah, blah, blah. And I need it to be running against this version of the database. Either could be a copy of prod, because something needs to be debugged or something's gone wrong. It could be a scrubbed copy of prod. It could be our standard test version we've got automated test scripts against. You choose which version of Acurity, which database, click a button, and it deploys up. Execute test cases, shut it down again. So again, this whole concept of how do you minimize your carbon footprint really comes into play with why we're moving towards the cloud. To make this happen, though, you guys will need to make some changes, and we're there to help you along the journey. The first one is you will no longer be able to go to the database. So this concept of, oh, I'll just run the SQL query against the database, pull something out, yeah, not really going to work. All the calls will need to happen through web APIs. And we're starting to expose all of those, and we'll continue to add more. Some of the exciting things, though, is when we start to look at the data side of it. In some of the earlier sessions, we talked about this concept of being able to detect when a member is going to be doing a certain type of behavioral thing, or being able to put some really rich data analytics over what's in the superfund. With AWS's toolkit, there's a lot of stuff that can be used, whether SageMaker for machine learning, whether it's QuickSight for the visualization or things like that. We're able to then start to use these capabilities and surface those up as well. The last one is we're looking to do this as an Iress hosted solution. Why? Because we can then start to implement all the best practice things we've learned about operating financial services products in the cloud, whether it's around security, in terms of once it's fully deployed, how code should be written so it's written in a secure manner, and things like that. So what does this mean? Well, currently we've got an on-prem version of Acurity that you all know and love. We're not going to keep that going in perpetuity, okay? We are going to move towards a SaaS model. So for existing clients, yeah, that's kind of the model we're going to keep on going with for now. What we've started to do, though, ourselves is start to move to SaaS phase 1. SaaS phase 1 means basically you've got infrastructure as code, you've got build pipelines, and you can start to dial up and dial down environments at the blink of the eyelid. We are currently implementing that or we're doing 2 implementations at the moment. And the idea is we want to get that right for ourselves, And we're looking towards the end of 2023 to be able to offer that to customers. So some, you guys, for example, who are looking at doing something, that's the part where we want to start have discussions around what does your journey look like. It's not going to be, and we're done, okay? There'll be a lot of stuff where you guys, for example, have done architect scripts which might shell out to the server's command line, execute an FTP executable, so it can send a file or receive a file. Those things won't work in the cloud environment. What will happen there is there'll be alternatives, cloud provision, for example, FTP services or things like that, that'll be called. And there'll be some tweaks here or there. All the stuff that goes around data validations, calculations, and that within the scripted stuff, that'll all still work. Phase 2 is where we continue the journey, as we already started a year and a half ago, of utilizing more and more cloud-native capabilities. Some of it will just provide more performance. Others will be these new capabilities that will start to surface, complements what AWS and other providers can give us. Acurity Online is essentially the window into Acurity that allows you to drive your member and advisor journey. Next slide. So essentially all it is a way that either we can give you a website that you can brand and use, you can build your own website, you can use a mobile app that you can brand and use, or you can build your own mobile app. We don't actually store the data inside Acurity Online. It's simply a conduit set of APIs that allows you to kind of go back down into Acurity and surface it with all the necessary security permissions and other things like that as well. Next slide, please. So the major focus around this naturally would be automation. To make automation work really well and pushing this idea of you need to go back to the members to get them to do as much as possible. For example, you want to kick off a rollover. You need to start to add things like identity verification to the part of that journey. Obviously, it needs to be secure. You want usage analytics so you can kind of understand who's doing what, how is it being used, where is it being used. One of the key features we provide out of AOL in the version of the website that we provide is that data-driven CMS. So essentially, we provide you the ability to do, whether it's customer segmentation or, as Shane loves to call it, smart content. So you can drill down to individual data elements down to the member level and use that to display the type of content or messaging that will be used on the website, whether it's around displaying certain pages, certain content, or even a mixture of the two. Next slide, please. So some of the recent stuff we've done, probably one of the highlights is this user security maintenance. What we've done here is we allow a user, a member, to be able to look on the website and see when did they last log in, what device was last used, the full history of all of that, which mobile devices are currently linked to it, which geography does it log in from, was it from Ukraine, was it from Russia, was it from Melbourne? And they're also able to then disconnect linked devices. So for example, they've moved across a new phone, they're able to disconnect that device so it can no longer access the account. We've also added an additional address validation service. We used to typically use QAS, which is a bit of a nightmare to install because it needs local installation and that. We've now partnered up, and we also support GBG's locate service, which is the SaaS address version. In terms of new things that are coming up, our main focus in terms of what we're delivering, so APIs we're building to expose, are focused around mobile web development. When we start talking to funds, what we've discovered is 10, 15 years ago, the website was the place to be. You had to have the website, that's member engagement. Fast forward to now, and if it's not the mobile phone, it's nothing. You need the website, that's a hygiene factor. You have to have that. But everything is now mobile. So what we're doing is we're building out all the capabilities, either in our own mobile app or surfacing these APIs so that you can enhance your own mobile app to do more. So things like, for example, biometric reminders. When somebody initially set it up, they might have decided, I'm going to ignore this, I don't want to use fingerprint, I don't want to use facial recognition. If they're not using something like that, not even using 2FA, we'll remind them to turn those on to make their account more secure. We're going to be adding in some additional dashboard items, for example, when the next pension payment is due, when was the last account, insurance details and that. We added online pension join, which is essentially a number of screens that you can optionally decide to include, one or all of them, into this journey, which allows you to choose which type of product, e.g. TTR, add beneficiaries, choose investments, add reversionaries, drawdowns, etc. So all of those are capabilities we're kind of building to. When we say now, it's stuff that is pretty much actually just finished, given that we ended this quarter. Next is stuff probably within the next 6 months. Later is, well, 6 months and somewhere in the future, as soon as we kind of schedule it in. Next one. Super Connector. This is probably the product I hate describing to people, because branding won. And branding said Superconnector is everything that relates to EBMS AS4, which unfortunately means it actually refers to 4 products. Next slide, please. What it does, though, is, again, they're not wrong, because it is a way to send information securely between different entities, the ATO, funds, and employers. Next slide, please. The complexity comes in when it does this, though. There's SBR services. That's MAS and MATS reporting. There's rollover gateway, Cont Gateway. You all know SuperStream by now. It's been around for a couple of years. And Employer Portal and Clearinghouse. That's our newest kid off the block. That was launched in April of 2021 and is currently used by Guild for a lot of their contributing employers. All of these services have native integration to Acurity. And the reason we did this was basically that concept, again, building out across that value chain. So at the point where we want to make it easy to get data in, we also wanted to reduce the integration costs that a fund would have. This is the feedback we got from Greg Everett, the GM at Guild, in terms of how the employers had found the service we built. We weren't really that surprised to see it. We liked the fact we got it, don't get me wrong, okay? But the build process that got us to here is kind of what works within Iress. It's not the concept of, we think we know it all, we're going to build it. Rather what we did is, we kind of went with a blank piece of paper, we spoke to heaps of employers, heaps of funds, understood what they saw as being the pain points around making contributions happen. One of the things I love from this was one of the employers made the comment, all I want to do is get in, get the job done, and get out. They didn't abbreviate and put silence there. That was collective good editing for the video. So what we did is we wanted to build a product that the employers would want to use when they needed to use it. The fact that a fund is going to get the data and needs to be clean and all those other types of things, that's a gimme, right? But this had to be very much employer focused. We also focused on performance. One of the employers that was using it to load up their file, now look, it's a large employer, I get that, 16,500 members. In their old system, it took between 3 and 5 hours to load. In the new system, it took 9 minutes. Those are the types of things that kind of resonate with the employer and then allowed the employers to really kind of connect with the system. Next. So what is our vision for Superconnector? Well, it just needs to be simple to use. At the end of the day, it's plumbing in terms of what a fund will receive around rollovers, contributions, etc. But what it also does is an employer engagement tool. If this is done right, and your employers are willing to spend that couple of minutes in there, because it's now faster and easier, that time they would have spent on a Friday afternoon just after pay run's done, they might be willing to fix a few more errors if it's easy enough for them to do. And this is kind of where we've started to focus on extra enhancements into the product. So we've launched it, and roughly every 6 to 8 weeks, we've been putting out new releases of the product. So we added things like enhanced to the transaction listing based on employer feedback. Something which we end up adding in is alerts. Now we talked about this concept of, well, the employer wants to get in, get something done, and get out. But if they've already allocated mentally half an hour to do it in their old system, they still will have that half an hour time slot they're hanging on to. If they've got this job done in 10 minutes, and we've flagged to them, these are the 4 errors you need to fix, or these are the 3 things that need to be done, and they can click in that one spot and it drills them right down to the screen that allows them to action it, things get done. And that's kind of where alerts came into it. Next slide, please. So where are we going next? Well, we're going to keep on doing more of the UX and UI enhancements. Why? Because, again, it just drives towards more efficiency, cleaner data. The big thing we're doing, though, is we're extending it to do more than just Accum. At the moment, it does Accum funds, and it'll go to any SPSF, any APRA fund, as you all would expect from a typical clearinghouse. In the DB space, though, it can push a file through and can contain DB tuples and that big deal. But the problem is it doesn't really validate it. Most of the systems out there don't. Some of our competitor solution will say, yeah, take a full database, copy it up there, take a whole pile of rules, pop them in somewhere else, and then you need to now contain 2 sets of rules, one within their solution, one within your core registry product. Replicate this database up so you can validate those cons. What we wanted to do is actually turn that on its head and make it that Superconnector becomes a single employer portal for all DB things. And what it'll do, it'll use the rule set that is contained within Acurity. It'll use the data within Acurity. So basically what happens is there'll be a dedicated pipe that'll go between Superconnector and the fund registry and validate all those things at the time the employer is pushing the data in. So the point where you start to get it, you'll be able to have clean data that's been validated against the registry using the same validation rules that Workbench would be firing when it received the normal DB file. We're also adding in some other things where it's employer-initiated processes. For example, someone's starting to begin a retirement. So typically, most funds will have built out something where, say, 2 or 3 or 4 page wizard, a couple of different fields on page 1, a couple of different fields on page 2, validate all of that, and the fund gets a request. John Doe wants to begin retirement and begin the retirement phase of their DB journey. What we're looking to do there, again, in the spirit of building a true product, which is generic, is make it in such a way that we build once and it can be used by any DB fund, because all that customization, which defines how many pages you want in the wizard, what fields need to be validated, how you edit service history, comp rates, all those things, will be just simply configuration options within the solution. So, in summary, what are we trying to say? Acurity, automation. Acurity Online, you choose the journey and we will help you with getting to your members and your advisors. And Superconnector, we'll meet all the compliance type stuff, but essentially it's plumbing and it's a way for you to connect to your employers. Thanks.